Splendid arrival of the drinks trolley, which arrives around this time every day. David Jacobs' trolley. What have we grabbed, Suze, from it this time? Oh, hang on. Sorry, go again. I had the wrong...
Oh, dear.
Okay. I grabbed, as it went past really, really quickly, a rather refreshing and non-alcoholic orange juice and soda.
Okay, that's
or
very
lemonade,
good. Matt's a little bit disappointed with that.
Disappointed. Well, you can't have an alcoholic drink every day, Matt. So just
can't I, by George?
Tonight's confession comes from Julie. Thank you, Julie, for sending in this tale. Father Simon and the Forgiving Fraternity. Obviously, Julie gets tonight's smart speaker. I've been carrying this burden around for nearly 30 years. I would like to be cleansed of the sin. I'm a very proud, compassionate and utmost professional nurse and currently work in a totally different field of nursing from where this sin was committed. I was a naive student nurse in the early 90s, and as part of the nurse training, we attended many placements which involved shadowing other professionals in their area of work, learning the ropes and assisting the experts where possible. On this particular placement, I was working alongside a district nurse and the home care team. I was placed with a lady I should call Barbara. Barbara was a sturdy, no-nonsense nurse who had worked on the team for many years and had accrued much experience on her travels through the community. Barbara and I were located a list of jobs for the day, which involved attending people's homes, taking blood, redressing wounds, checking on the elderly and assisting them where needed. As we worked our way through the many jobs of the day, we were visiting a new lady who we will call Mavis. Now, Mavis was an elderly lady who needed assistance getting up, bathed and dressed following surgery and a long hospital admission. We checked the address of 12 Temple Road, not obviously the
not the real road, right, yeah.
Which we found with ease. We knocked on the door and an elderly lady answered the door, and Barbara showed her the ID and said, district nursing team, and Mavis warmly stepped aside and let Barbara and myself into her home and closed the door. Barbara said that we were there to bath her and help her get dressed for the day. So we were slightly surprised to find Mavis already dressed. Barbara checked to see if any district nurse team had visited before us, and Mavis confirmed that we were the first team and how nice it was to see us. Barbara then proceeded to tell me to go and run the bath, dear, while Mavis offered us hospitality and popped to the kitchen to make us a cup of tea. I ran the bath as directed and asked Mavis if she would like bubbles and a change of clothes, as Barbara opened some plastic aprons and gloves so we could help Mavis get bathed. Mavis returned to the bathroom with 2 cups of tea, proceeded to undress and have an assisted bath. Barbara, Mavis and I chatted as we bathed Mavis, making small talk about the weather, what Mavis had been doing during the week, and our daily duties as a district nursing team. We completed the task at hand, helped Mavis get dressed and made her comfortable back in the lounge as we tidied the bathroom and washed our empty teacups in the kitchen. Mavis stated that the district nursing service was excellent and how she had enjoyed our company and was grateful for the company and support as she had not had any visitors for a while and she was a little unsteady on her feet. She did, however, ask why we kept on calling her Mavis.
There we go.
No.
As her name was Betty.
Oh.
Barbara and I stopped in our tracks of washing and drying cups in the kitchen and wide-eyed stared at each other as the realization of what Betty had just said to us began to sink in. As the colour drained from Barbara and I, we walked back into Betty's lounge and asked her to confirm what her name and address was. Betty said her address was 12 Temple Street, of course, and as she continued to chat about the wonderful care of the nurses and how she'd telling all her friends about how lovely we were when she goes to bingo at the weekend and how next week we should buy some, she would buy some chocolate biscuits for us to have with our tea. As Barbara and I tried not to vomit with anxiety, the awareness of us being at the wrong address and bathing the wrong lady began to sink in. Betty continued to ask which chocolate biscuits we would like and what time next week we would be visiting her. Barbara explained that on this occasion the assisted bath was a one-off complimentary service from the district nursing team and that we would be unlikely to be back again. We thanked her for the cup of tea, tidied up after ourselves and made a hasty retreat back to Barbara's car, where we sat in silence for a few seconds. Not a word was spoken about Mavis as we drove around the corner to 12 Temple Road to knock on the correct door of Mavis. Barbara and I did not mention this when we returned to the office, nor did we speak to each other about Mavis ever again. I have not recounted the story since my early nursing days, and just typing this now instills me with guilt and shame. I don't ask forgiveness from Barbara, who is long since retired, but I do ask forgiveness from Betty, as she looked forward to the company, the storytelling and the assistance with a much pleasant bubble bath from the lovely assistant district nursing team. To this day, the mere mention of district nursing team sends shivers down my spine and makes my toes curl as I reflect on that day in question. I know the forgiving and faithful collective will pass an informed judgment for which I must accept and forever carry as a senior nurse and now consummate professional, you'll be delighted to know. Julie, which again is not my real name. Well, everyone seems to have come out of this okay.
Correct.
Sister Susie's in charge. What do you say?
Well, I do feel like what her name was should have come up a lot earlier than it did, rather than after the bath while they were having a cup of tea and washing the cups. Like that maybe should have been checked as soon as she went in the door, maybe. Yeah. However, you know, Mavis got her bath maybe a little bit later than planned, but Mavis got her bath, and Betty seemed to have a really lovely time. So, Julie, you've held on to this for so long, and I genuinely feel like you feel so anxious about it that I'm going to forgive you.
Brother from another guy.
I mean, I'm definitely going to forgive, because everyone came out of this positively. And it is amazing how people, if you call them by the wrong name, they very rarely contradict you. And I remember interviewing someone on a previous radio station where I called a certain sports star a certain name throughout the entire interview, and when we came off air he said, "Oh, by the way, that's not my name." And I went, "Well, you could have said something in the previous 5 minutes." So I am definitely going to forgive.
Okay, well, I think probably, Julie, you're going to get forgiveness all round, but let's check, because it may well be that we get angry people who... we did broadcast a confession earlier from Julie, who was visiting as a district nurse, but they went to the wrong house, gave the wrong woman a bath, even though she was very happy about it. So there were no losers, basically. Let's find out the people's verdict. Here it comes.
Yeah, everybody's forgiving tonight. Josh says, sounds like you made Betty's day, although it was a bit stressful on the day. I think everyone came out of this very well. Tom in Norwich says, I agree with Matt.
Oh, yes.
I've also been in one of those extremely cringy situations where you call someone the wrong name for a whole conversation, then they correct you 20 minutes later. Totally forgive Julie. And finally, Angela says, Betty sounds like she deserves some TLC and company. P.S. I've only just visited Greatest Hits Radio today to try it out before the arrival of Ken, only to find out that you live there as well.
Yes, we do.
So happy to hear you again.
Isn't that nice? Who's that there at the end?
That's Angela in Leafy Leatherhead.
Angela in Leafy Leatherhead, you're very welcome, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. The home of Ken Bruce from April the 3rd, I hear you say. Anyway, your confession, please, would be very welcome. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's 14 minutes to 6 o'clock, and...
Time for the trolley.
What a relief it is indeed. Time for the trolley, and... grabbing from the drinks trolley as it whizzes past, pushed by Sir David Jacobs. What is it you've selected for us today, Susie?
Well, I've gone for a classic martini today. I would have mine with gin, but obviously you can have vodka. And I would always say stirred, not shaken. But it's a personal choice, whatever you like.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that top tip. Today's confession comes from Hugo. Thank you, Hugo. Simon and the Saintly Collective. My misdemeanour happened a few years ago at a summer music festival. And being a man of a certain age, I needed to visit the toilet after every pint I had consumed.
Okay.
Oh dear.
Of course, there was a day when I could go for the whole day without using the loo. I once lasted 2 whole days. But those days were now long gone.
Wow, okay.
My brother once went to a music festival and lasted the whole festival without trying hard, as we used to say in our family. But you get to a certain period in your life and you can't, in the words of Beautiful South, you can't hold it all in it.
No, you can't.
So,
trying hard.
I was 5, I think.
Okay.
My parents said, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying hard. Anyway, the toilets were in a huge crescent of about 100 blue portaloos, and the queue was really, really long. I joined the back of the queue, obviously, because I'm British, and waited patiently while the whole queue had to listen to 2 guys who thought themselves very, very funny and interesting. I say this because they spoke in such loud voices that the whole queue could hear them as they laughed heartily at themselves. And as we know, loud always equals funny and interesting. They were talking about the festivals that they'd been to over the years, uproarious tales and wild nights, crazy campers, and how everyone had, over the years, found them hilarious. So anyway, they finally got to the front of the queue, but as they were being so funny and amusing themselves, they were so busy being loud they didn't notice that someone was coming out of a loo in the middle of the crescent. I waited a minute and then I started calling, "Oh, there's an empty loo over there, come on." They were so engrossed in their funny conversation, they didn't hear me. So I thought, well, if nobody else is going, I will. And I walked out of the queue to several murmurs and mutters with everyone now watching, and I strode over to the Portaloo Crescent. This is where my plan got a little sketchy, because having looked away from the door, you know, that I'd seen someone coming out of, it was hard for me to find precisely the right one. I was heading in the general direction, looking for the door that had the green lock to show that it was vacant, as opposed to the red lock that would have showed the opposite. Anyway, relief was at hand, because there it was. There's the cubicle. There's the green lock. I got hold of the door and pulled.
Oh, no.
It was stiffer than usual, which was a surprise, so I gave it a good pull, and it did open. And out popped a guy who'd been hanging on to the inside of the door, and he had his pants around his ankles.
Of course.
He swung out as the door swung. Why was he holding? I don't know. He was saying something in a harsh tone, but in the surprise of him shooting out half-dressed, I didn't take in the exact words, but can imagine that they were not particularly kind words. Obviously, I then quickly shut the door, and he swung back in with the door.
Yeah.
Now that the door was closed, I was too ashamed to look up to the queue and just scurried away to find another toilet area and did not hang around to apologise. This is so British. It's exactly what I would have done. So embarrassed. Just go and find somewhere else. So, Simon, I was hoping that you and the Gracious Collective could forgive me, as this was a genuine mistake, and I never meant to expose the poor man's privates to the 100 or so people waiting, goggle-eyed in the queue. Moral: don't hang on to the door in a Portaloo. I'm still not quite sure why he was hanging on to the door anyway, but maybe it was for support. Maybe he had one, and then as the door opened, and then he's...
Yeah.
Like that. I'm kind of reenacting it.
Well,
it's like a cuckoo clock. He just kind of popped out. Anyway, Sister Susie, what are you making of this? You're an old festival veteran.
He could have been hanging onto the door out of fear, because if he'd have heard someone trying to open it, maybe he was trying to stop that happening. So maybe he heard that Hugo was on the other side and was just like, "No, I can't. Please don't open the door." Also, like, they're not that thick, Portaloos, so you could have just said, "There's someone in here," and then Hugo might not have pulled it so hard and open the door. I don't know, Hugo. I think it's a very tricky situation to be in, and I think everyone's fear when they use a Portaloo is that someone's going to open the door and do that, and for that, I don't know. Also, I feel really sorry for you that you went for a wee, and you didn't get to go for a wee, and
no, you had to go and find somewhere else.
I'm just going to forgive you, because it was the noisy boy's fault.
I find it quite stressful, the whole situation, the whole going to the loo thing.
Don't do it. Yeah.
The whole queue, and that people are annoyed. And have you got the...
also...
when you get there, will there be paper? Will there be paper? Who knows?
No, always take your own. Always take your own.
Anyway, brother from another guy.
Yeah, it strikes me that it's the system that's wrong here, isn't it?
The system?
It's the system. and the system. The system is very haphazard queuing, isn't it? What's going on there, where people are just talking and therefore you miss out on one of the loos becoming vacant? And also, what are these locks like, where you can just pull the door and it suddenly opens? That doesn't make sense at all. And for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Oh, right. Well, okay. So, Hugo needs the collective forgiveness, and he's asking for it. 61054. First word is Simon. Festival confession, bit out of season. 61054 for the people's verdict. First word is Simon. Forgiving Hugo or not? More in a moment. Let's update you on the people's verdict on tonight's confession, which came from Hugo, who had an altercation, with a guy in a Portaloo at a festival back in the day, which involved with the guy swinging out when he didn't want to be swinging out at all. What do we get? Matthew.
Oh, yes. So
What do we
Alice-
get? That's your cue.
Oh,
What
right.
do we get then from the people's verdict?
Well, what we
Over
get-
to you, Matt.
Thanks.
At the verdict desk.
Well done. Alice in Banstead says, I remember doing the exact same thing in primary school. It's mortifying for both the person in the toilet and the person who opens the door. Absolutely forgiven. Not forgiven, though, says Sean in Poole. If the door didn't open easily, clearly it was occupied. Hugo should have stopped trying so
it
hard
had the
to
green
open
thing.
the door. And John in Plymouth says, totally forgive Hugo. I simply cannot deal with festival loos.
Yes, I mean, they are getting better, let's acknowledge that.
Oh, really?
They
Oh,
are
right.
getting better, but there's still a bit of an issue for many. Your confession, please. We'll exchange it for a smart speaker if we use it. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Some fantastic Sweet Caroline. 5:45, there goes the drinks trolley. Just caught, I think, at the end there by young Susie in the pub. Did you catch a drink as it rolled past?
I did catch a drink, and it's a little wee dram of Auchentoshan single malt whiskey for Burns Night.
Of course.
Auchentoshan.
Auchentoshan, yeah.
Okay, that sounds very good. Pass it round. I might need it during the reading of today's confession, which comes from the Major. Let's just
Okay.
leave it at that, shall we? Simon and the Saintly Collective. The year was... If Bennett McIntyre is listening, you can have this. The year was 1999, and NATO had decided to deploy military force into Kosovo to save it from the unfolding humanitarian disaster that was unfolding there. The UK had decided to send in the Paras, naturally, supported by a brigade of a couple of thousand logisticians, such as suppliers, mechanics, cooks, drivers, engineers, and so on, and pioneers. I was a major at this time and was regimental second in command in the Royal Logistic Corps, meaning I was the second most senior officer in the regiment under the commanding officer, who we'll call Nobby. My regiment, some 400 of us, deployed in RAF aircraft into Skopje, the capital of Macedonia, which is now North Macedonia, ready to support the invasion. The plan saw the Paras and other roughy-tufty types charge into Kosovo after the RAF and other air forces had done the bombing bit. This is obviously like a paraphrase
Of
of
course.
the official terminology.
Yeah.
Us loggies were to follow hot on the heels of the Paras to set up the support bases. The wonderful pioneers of my regiment went on to build refugee tented camps for displaced souls, help the infantry by doing extra security patrols, and many other good works. But before any of this could take place, my regiment needed its heavy kit and vehicles that were being offloaded in Thessaloniki in Greece. I was therefore tasked to be in the rear with the gear and get all the vehicles and kit up from the port in Greece into Macedonia, and then up a narrow road from Skopje to Pristina as soon as the route was cleared of enemy by the Paras. Cleared of enemy by the Paras being a very important
Yes,
bit
and
there.
it would be.
Yeah.
All went well with the first few convoys that set off. I decided to lead the final convoy of some 20 trucks up to Pristina to meet my local commanding officer and allow him to deploy our soldiers to their various tasks. Prior to flying out to Kosovo, I had splashed out on a Gucci-looking GPS device so that I could never be in the wrong place, or so I thought. The redoubtable Regimental Transport Senior NCO, Sergeant Wilson, was driving the lead Land Rover, and I hopped in as the convoy set off. All was going well as we drove along the motorway. We were making good progress, with almost no traffic around us, which I was surprised to see. I'd heard that there were major military traffic jams as the whole of NATO was trying to get through a narrow mountain pass into Kosovo. Hey-ho, clearly just rumours. We'd been motoring along nicely and I was chilling out when I checked my GPS device to see that I was leading a military convoy northeast instead of northwest.
Oh, no.
I suddenly recalled seeing Skopje Airport on my left when it should have appeared on my right. My concerns escalated when I saw a motorway sign indicating that Belgrade lay ahead. I became concerned enough to ask Sergeant Wilson if he was sure this was the right route, as at that particular moment, NATO air forces were bombing Belgrade and we really shouldn't be entering Serbia directly as we would not be well received. He responded with the panic-inducing words of, "No, sir, you're the regimental second in command. I assumed you were navigating."
Oh, no.
I looked in the rearview mirror to check on our convoy, and we seemed to have lost at least 15 trucks, the drivers of which, clearly realising that their glorious regimental second in command had not taken the correct turn off the motorway, so were presumably steaming off to Kosovo on their own. Brave chaps. We turned off the motorway at the next exit, just prior to the border with Serbia, to head back to Skopje. For those unused to highly technical military tactics, it's called in the trade a U-turn. Such a manoeuvre is fraught with risk, as any one of my diminished number of followers could have missed my departure from the motorway and just carried on into Serbia, a country with which we were technically at war. Just not at that particular part of the Balkans, though. Luckily, the loyal five managed to exit and follow me and return to Skopje, chucked a righty, and headed up to Pristina. Though the trucks got stuck in heavy traffic, I got waved through by the military police, and I arrived at our HQ minus the whole convoy. The commanding officer, Nobby, had been really looking forward to seeing all his regiment complete in Pristina, kept looking behind my Land Rover, expecting to see the headlights of 20 trucks. When he asked where they were, my answer of, "Sorry, Colonel, I haven't got a Scooby, but I'm sure they'll turn up. They're good lads." And I'm all for empowering our young soldiers, apparently failed to meet the benchmark of an acceptable excuse. My confidence, reinforced with cross fingers, was justified as they trickled in over the ensuing hours. My wallet took a beating buying the lads beers over the coming weeks in the regimental bar we established. The regiment went on to deliver fantastic support to the denizens of Kosovo and made a real difference. Father Simon, I plead forgiveness from NATO for something I've never said before.
Wow.
For almost starting a second front, albeit a small one, with a Land Rover and 5 trucks in their altercation with Serbia. To the drivers of my regiment for sending them, or at least those most loyal to me, the few, on a giant detour of discovery around the Balkans. But most of all, to my former CO, Nobby, whose look of disappointment and bewilderment in equal measure as he heard my explanation of the epic trip will haunt me until I die. He actually recommended me for promotion, which I subsequently got, and I've never got lost in the Balkans again. Mainly because I have never been there. Anyway, classic fade.
Yeah.
Excellent skills. Thank you, Major, for a fascinating tale. Quite an extraordinary one as well. Let's check in with Sister Susie, the voice of responsibility.
Well, Major, I think you were right when you said you were better in the rear with the gear rather than being up front, because I think you had a job to do, and I don't think you gave it enough attention, and I don't think you did it properly, and I think you should have. So therefore, I'm not going to forgive you.
Asking for forgiveness from NATO, as a line, is pretty good.
It's a good line.
Brother from another.
I'm going to say that's the first time anyone's had to apologise to NATO, and that's the reason why I'm going to forgive. Also, because I don't think we've ever had a confession where someone has admitted losing a convoy. Sorry, I lost the convoy. I'm sure they're on their way. Definitely forgiven. Superb story. Well done.
It is fantastic. So the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive the Major? 61054. First word is Simon. Thank you very much. We will try and mention as many today. We'll spill it over to tomorrow. Today's confession came from the Major. He was leading a convoy in a dangerous military situation. He was taking his convoy towards Belgrade, and it should have been going the other way. Anyway, it all ended fine, and his commanding officer promoted him. Here's the people's verdict.
Yeah, loads of ex-military getting in touch. Chris says, not forgiven. Everybody knows in the military you never let an officer navigate. Ex-Corporal Davis says, it's with a heavy heart that I have to forgive the Major. As we all know, many an officer has been geographically challenged and blamed his NCOs. However, he made up for it in the correct manner. Jackie says, not forgiven. Classic example of the military saying, the most dangerous thing known to man is an officer with a map. Many examples of which I remember from my army days. And finally, Paula says, I would forgive the Major. His actions have given us a laugh. There didn't appear to be any ill effects from his mistake, and he did get a promotion. Love the show, by the way. Just found it now since you left the other place. Happy days.
Yes, and my wallet took a beating buying the lads beers over the coming weeks in the regimental bar we established, but a price, said the Major, worth paying to regain short-term popularity. But who knew that officers and map reading did not go together until we did this confession? Obviously, if you're in the military, then you know. But thank you for educating us. And send your confession, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.